Hello, my name's Dave Rody. This is a channel all about using machine learning to do recommendations and personalization. And if you're into that kind of thing, then yeah, please like and subscribe. Today, I'm going to do what everybody that's sort of in this space has been doing, is giving a little bit of commentary on the Richard Sutton interview on the Dwarkesh Patel podcast. It's so if you don't know. Richard Sutton. He's very well known for reinforcement learning. Has written an important book on reinforcement learning and has recently won a Turing Prize. And Dwarkesh is coming at things from a much more an LLM angle. And it's really nice conversation. I don't think we see enough of like different perspectives butting heads, and it's very amiable and really fun. So I really encourage people to listen to it. And it'll allow me to make some points on sort of some topics that are a little bit related, but are a little bit my own interest as well. So let me kick off by playing a small excerpt.
I think there's some interesting analogies. So, kids will initially learn from imitation. You don't think so?
No, of course not.
Really?
Yeah.
I think kids just like watch people. They like kind of try to like say
How
the same
old are
word.
these kids?
I think the level.
What about the first 6 months?
I think they're kind of imitating things. They're trying to like make their mouth sound the way they see their mother's mouth sound, and then they'll say the same words without understanding what they mean. And as they get older, the complexity of the imitation they do increases. So that's you're imitating maybe the skills that your people in your band are using to hunt down the deer or something. And then you go into the learning from experience RL regime. But I think there's a lot of imitation learning happening with humans.
It's surprising. Yeah, you can have such a different point of view.
Yeah.
When I see kids just trying things and like waving their hands around and moving their eyes around, and no one tells them there's no imitation for how they move their eyes around or even the sounds they make. They may want to create the same sounds, but the actions, the thing that the infant actually does, there's no targets for that. There are no examples for that.
I agree that it doesn't explain everything infants do, but I think it guides the learning process. I mean, even LLM, when it's trying to predict the next token early in training, it will like make a guess. It'll be different from what like it actually sees. And in some sense, it's like very short horizon RL, where it's like making this guess of like, I think this token will be this. It's actually this other thing, similar to how a kid will try to say a word. It comes out wrong.
The large language models is learning from training data. It's not learning from experience. It's learning from something that will never be available during its normal life. There's never any training data that says you should do this action in normal life.
I think this is maybe.
Okay, so as you can see, I really like the fact that when they're disagreeing, but they're smiling at each other. I think that's really very healthy and a really great thing. And my perspective, I should clarify, is neither of the two perspectives that we're seeing here. So one of them is very, is a reinforcement learning perspective and someone with really interesting ideas and foundations in this. And that's Richard Sutton, of course. And then Dwarkesh Patel is more representing LLM ideas. And they're both interested in something very ambitious, like really like Bayesian, like artificial general intelligence, something to me out into the future, right? I think it's out into the future realistically. My perspective is applying Bayesian decision theory, so it's a little different to both, but that's much more, I will argue, much more closely related to reinforcement learning. And I'm interested in reward optimizing recommender systems. So I do think Bayesian decision theory is somewhat like a version of reinforcement learning. And one of the main ideas, to my mind, in Bayesian decision theory is there's a very sharp distinction between your model of the world, the way the world operates, and decisions and utilities and what you're trying to do. These are completely separated. It's one of the defining characteristics. And I think it's an important kind of concept to bring in to understand this discussion, because I think Richard Sutton, even though it's not formalized in the Bayesian decision theoretic way, reinforcement learning has a similar distinction. He's talking about models, and within reinforcement learning, the decision rule is called a policy. And it's roughly the same thing. I would say maybe it's exactly the same thing, but it's more obviously there's a causal aspect of a policy, and sometimes it's represented as a probability, even if it isn't in a probability, let's say in the Bayesian sense. So this, I think, gives an interesting foundation to understand what some of the disagreements here are, and it also allows me to make a few points that are kind of close to my heart. So let me draw out a few things. So there's a number of comments about, is imitation learning very important? And further on in the discussion, there's discussion about training, and even if supervised learning happens within nature. To my mind, what's happening here is very much associated with this distinction between the decision rule and the model. And Richard Sutton has a clear distinction, as do I, of these. And his idea is, well, supervised learning may never happen in nature, because what he's describing supervised learning as is, here's an input, the correct output is this. Now try and fill in and work out correct outputs for other inputs. And so the correct decision. So the supervised learning is actually telling you, and they also use the word training in this sense too. So many of these words have more than one meaning, and we misunderstand each other through this. And I think this is going on. I think we see the same phenomenon where Dwarkesh is talking about next token prediction as short horizon RL, and there's a reward associated with predicting a next token correctly. I think this is just a model. It's just an explanation of the world. And so I think that distinction just isn't so well made, I would say, in the LLM community, in a lot of the machine learning community, and particularly statistical learning theory, which is more a theoretical framework, deliberately, or it's a foundational concept within statistical learning theory that these ideas are mixed, that there is no real distinction between model and decision rule. It's one of the biggest differences between Bayesian decision theory and statistical learning theory. So I think that's a good way to understand that difference as well. A point that Sutton makes that is really close to my heart because I'm interested in reward optimizing recommender systems. These are less ambitious, but these are recommender systems that the real value comes from A/B testing. And I'm going to be talking about this a lot, but the way a recommender system is typically built, it's from some sort of relevance signal, and to quote Richard Sutton, it's training from something that will never be available during its normal life. And that's also the case for LLMs in the way they have been traditionally trained, which is this this initial distribution on tokens on very, very large data sets, and there's some fine tuning using something that has some sort of partial reinforcement learning ideas, RLHF, but it certainly doesn't go all the way, and it's certainly near horizon and other things like this. I don't believe this is necessary, by the way. It's maybe a little bit where I would differ. A recommender systems algorithm can be improved from its own logs, and so can an LLM. There are close to 1 billion users of LLMs. They're producing logs. As well as training on the internet, you can train on those logs, and you can do something much more akin to reward optimizing, at least in principle. Of course, it's difficult in practice. So yeah, these are all ideas that are really close to my heart. Another point that Sutton talks about a little bit later, and I also rather like this, is that he says, well, maybe I'm a bit of a contrarian against some of my contemporaries, but I'm a classicist in other ways, and I will sort of read old ideas, and I'm actually in tune with older ideas. I'm just not picking up fads that are recently occurring. And as someone who likes dusty books and old thinkers, but different ones to Richard Sutton, this resonates with me a bit. But I would add an additional point is old thinkers didn't agree with each other, and we don't need to be, Bohr and Einstein did not agree. We don't need to have the greatness of Bohr or Einstein to realize that if we delve into that, which I don't, of course, but we would have to pick a side or try to work out which of those two we agree in. And I think it's a good thing. And I like this, very much like this podcast, where there is this sort of, I disagree, and the response is to smile and to say, tell me why. I think this is very healthy. It's really fun. You should check it out. So thanks a lot.